Well, good day, everybody. My name is Liz Kovach, and we want to welcome you back to our webinar series. And we're going to be talking today about, are you ready for the 2024 building code? We have with us today Tracy Nadiger from All Weather Windows. We want to give a shout out to All Weather Windows as they are the presenting sponsor of this webinar today. And we will have her introduce our speaker in just a moment. Really quickly, a few housekeeping things. I'd like to mention that we are recording this webinar, so we will send out the link along with the PDF of the presentation so that you can share it with your team if that's what you choose to do. And of course, we'll have an opportunity for some questions and answers at the end. And if you have questions, you could put them in the chat. Chris, who is here with me from the WRLA, will be managing that piece. And we really want to thank you for joining us today. And I see Tracy is with us. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to pass it over to Tracy to go ahead with the introduction.
Awesome. Thanks, Liz. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
100%.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so very excited on behalf of All Weather Windows to introduce today's speaker, Shauna Henderson from Blue House Energy. Shauna is Blue House's resident building science expert, a designer of green homes, and planner for deep energy retrofits. She's a sought-after speaker, author, and blogger. She has published numerous books, research reports, and technical studies in the industry, and she is responsible for course content, instructional design, and business development. So today, as Liz mentioned, we're going to talk about the incoming enforcement of the building step codes in 2024 and the path to net zero, drawing on the energy efficiency training and materials that Shauna has worked on. So I'll just pass it over to Shauna. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good morning, and I guess it's the morning for everybody. Maybe it's the afternoon for me. I'm in Nova Scotia. So I'm going to quickly turn off my camera so that you don't see me waving my hands around, because I do a lot of this, and it's kind of, a little bit annoying when you're trying to see and focus on the content. So I'm just going to turn off my camera, and we'll just jump right in, and there will be some time for questions at the end. So Blue House Energy started on almost a dare from one of my business partners. And we have been providing seriously enjoyable learning online since 2012. So we're quite a ways ahead of the pack in terms of getting online and focusing on this. But this is really important for people who are working on the tools, can't often take time away from their jobs to do training. So this was one of the key things that we thought we could fill a gap. So, oops, don't need one to give control to anybody else. I want to keep control there. So we partnered with WRLA. I have trouble with that acronym, so if I just say the association, that's what I'm going to do. So we partnered with the association earlier this year to bring you a discount and a selection of courses for your staff and crews. Today, I'm going to talk about codes, energy conservation, and the LBM industry. First of all, you're probably familiar with the National Building Code and your local codes, but we're going to really focus on Part 9.36, which is energy efficiency in residential and small commercial buildings. So Part 9 focuses on buildings that are under 6,000 square feet or 600 meters squared and 3 stories or less. So that covers everything from a single family detached home through semi-detached row houses and low-rise MURBs, multi-unit residential buildings. Building code's been in effect since 1941. And up until up until 2010, it was all about thou shalt. It was a prescriptive format. So if you were building new construction, you had to follow tables and requirements. 2010 brought in energy conservation measures in Part 9.36, which also introduced what we call the performance path, which means that you can use trade-offs from within the code Or you can use energy modeling. You can work with an engineer and you can go through first principles, or you can work with an energy advisor and they will use HOT 2000 to model the energy use in your building. So that's the piece that is ramping up. 2020, we had another cycle of the code, and that brought in the tiered energy code, which gives you 5 different steps, with the base step being around the 2010 code, and all the way up to net zero. So this is a big step up. We're talking about high performance building codes, is what we're effectively talking about. And so there used to be just carrots, right? You could do the R2000 program, you could do Energy Star, you could do all of these other things, but they were voluntary, which meant that it was just a carrot, right? It was you, the builder was going in and saying, I'm a specialty builder, or I'm high performance, or I'm R2000, and we had no stick. Now we have a stick. So everybody's going to have to go there. BC is way ahead of the pack. So for folks who are working in BC already, you may already be very familiar with this. The BC Energy Step Code came into effect as a voluntary thing for municipalities to take on. I think 2016. My brain's a little foggy on that one. I think 2016. But as of May 1st this year, buildings under the municipalities that use the BC Building Code must hit step 3. And that's just going to increase up until 2032 is when the you need to be at step 5, which is basically a net zero house. And net zero means that the house can produce as much energy as it consumes over the course of a year. Also in BC is the Vancouver Building Bylaw, which is also based on the step code and has some other variables in it. I'm not going to dive too deep into those because I'm going to talk about the reasons why you need to care about the building code and what you can bring to your clients as you go forward in the next few years. So we have part 9.36, energy efficiency in new houses. We have high performance housing codes in BC and the National Building Code. Excuse me. Coming up in the 2025 code are retrofits. This means part 10, alterations to existing buildings, is focusing on energy conservation for retrofits. So this is huge for all of those builders or contractors that you have not seen focus on high performance. They're now going to have to actually work within that realm, and it's going to be new to them. So why do we care so much? How does it affect you? Because we're moving into places where building science is the key. Part 9.36, everything to do with energy efficiency and energy conservation, is based in building science. Building science looks at the house as a system, how all of the parts of the house or the building interact with each other, the envelope, the occupants, the outside environment, mechanicals. It's all connected. It's all dynamic because we have moisture changing, we have temperature changes, we have wind. We want to make sure that we can control all of those things so that the house is comfortable and reduces energy use for the occupants. And then bonus points when we reduce energy. We also typically reduce carbon loading, so we're doing something for the environment as well. So we're going to look at the key primary factors for building science are based on controlling airflows, heat transfer, and moisture flows. When you get into these high performance buildings, the key to them, because it's the most complex piece, is a high performance wall. Now, everything else has requirements within the building code for insulation levels, for air tightness, for the different control layers, but the walls are the places where there's the most variation. So typically we see this kind of a wall, which is a double stud wall. It could be a 2x4 stud walls built one inside the other, with one of them being the bearing wall, or they could be a 2x6 on the outside as a bearing wall and a 2x4 on the inside. They can be connected by one rod, like a 2x8 or 2x4 sill plate. They could have separate sill plates. They can even be manufactured like floor joists, like not like floor joists. They can be floor joists that are actually stood up in a vertical position as well. There's a lot of variations in this one in terms of how builders like to do the assembly. Mainly, they like to do this one because there's no special training and no special materials. You don't have to do a lot more than put up two walls, one inside the other. So crews can stand them up pretty quickly. The other wall, and you'll see this a lot as well, is a split insulation wall where you have rigid or semi-rigid insulation on the exterior of the sheathing. Excuse me. And you have typically a very inexpensive batt insulation to the interior in the stud cavity. And these vary widely. You can have rock wool, fiberglass, blown cellulose on the interior. You could have semi-rigid mineral wool on the exterior. You could have a type 1, type 2, or type 4 insulation, polyisocyanurate, or an insulated sheathing product. Wide range here too. What we also need to know, so once you get past, here's all the different pieces and bits of the high performance walls, is what suits which climate zone. So most Canadians live in zones 4, 5, and 6. When you're in Western Canada, if you're in BC, you could be the range of between 4 and 8. But once you move past that first border, you're moving into colder mid-continent climate zones. So by the time you hit, Saskatchewan and Manitoba, now you're actually in zone 7A, 7B, and 8. And those are very different approaches because of the extreme temperatures. Now, when we can go back to most of the population lives in 4, 5, and 6, and the bottom part of 7A. There's a broad swath of housing that we can work with some really solid building science that is right across the country has been brought into place. 7A, top part of 7A, and then 7B and 7A, we really need to focus on more detailing and take a different approach to the products that we're using for insulation. So here's a quick little chart showing you the effective R values for above grade walls as per the BC Building Code, which is reflected and in the National Tiered Code. So they've been harmonized with an agreement that went right across the provinces, I think 2022. Anyway, that's irrelevant for this. But you can see that there's quite a range of effective R values for above grade walls as you move through not only the climate zones, but as you move from step 1, which is slightly improved from the 2010 code, through step 2, 3, 4, and 5. So how you deal with these ranges of climate zone and which part of the step code or the tiered code you're working with is key. Oh, there we go. Oh, no, I missed one. There we go. So on top of effective R value, which is a weighted calculation that takes into consideration the fact that you have differing insulation or thermal resistance between areas of a wall. For example, the studs are wood Wood has R1 per inch. So if you've got a 2x6, you've got R 5.5 or so. And in that cavity, you could have up to R24 batt insulation. If you went with something else, like a closed cell foam, you'd have more insulation there. And so effective R value basically says, here's the percentage of stud, and here's the percentage of stud cavity, and gives you a weighted solution. So that's what effective R value is. On top of that, you also need to know what the inboard and outboard ratio is for, excuse me, the cavity fill and the outboard insulation. I'll get into why in a second. And then you also need to know about the permeability of the whole assembly. So those are three things that are all in the building code, and that we're going to have to be very clear about what we're doing when we do those, the calculus between my climate zone and the piece of the step code or tiered code that I'm working in, and the materials that the builder or renovator has put into their order. So our biggest threat, and it's probably no surprise to anybody who sells lumber, is that mold loves wood, moisture is the source of mold, and we get occupant health issues on top of rot and structural issues when we have moisture and mold problems in a house. So the ideal conditions for mold to grow are very much like an interior of a house, anywhere between 18 to 24 degrees, moisture content in the wood at 20, and relative humidity in the house of 50, 70 being when mold really starts to generate. So those are not uncommon conditions for the interior of a house. And we know that moisture is enemy number one for wood. Solid wood, excuse me, and lumber take a long time to decay and perish. But the more you get into engineered wood products, the faster they delaminate and decay when exposed to moisture and temperature problems or extremes. And then we have cellulose-based products. So the whole house is basically built out of wood and cellulose. And when we have paper-faced drywall, we end up with mold when we have those high humidity levels. And this is often the time where we go, there's a big problem here, and all we're seeing is the superficial piece, but there could be rot and structural issues behind. So we want to make sure that whatever we're doing in a new building that we're taking to high performance, but especially in an older existing building that we're going to move to a deep energy retrofit, that we are not creating more problems in the wall system than already exist or could exist in the case of a new building. So that's all about control layers. And control layers are the outcome of building science. The role they play is to counteract air moisture and heat flows. So we have an air barrier, we have a vapor barrier or vapor barrier or vapor diffusion retarder. We need to create a thermal envelope. So we need to have something that's going to give us the thermal resistance of the insulation. And then we also need weather protection. So when we're talking about walls, we're talking about a whole system. And this also is part and parcel of foundation and ceiling/roof components, but the whole house has to be dealt with. But I'm focusing on walls right now because they are the biggest puzzle piece, and they are the biggest puzzle piece because that's where occupants are most affected by the assembly. So it's either they're comfortable because the ambient temperature of the inside of the wall is closer to their temperature. Windows are high performance, so they're not losing as much heat to the window from their own bodies. And then also, of course, the energy efficiency piece of it. So we need to be able to create these assemblies looking at what the thermal gradient and wetting potential of the wall is, we have this thing called the dew point, which is where the temperature of the air that is in the wall starts to get lower as it reaches the outside temperature. And we want to make sure that that dew point is not on the back of a cold sheathing, because it's going to condense out and cause moisture to be trapped inside the wall cavity. We want it to be outside, either on the outside face of the sheathing or on the outside face of that split insulation, depending on the wall system that I showed you earlier. So the whole assembly has to have the drying potential has to be baked into the assembly. So it can dry to the interior or the exterior or both. And again, that's going to depend on where you are and what the builder has chosen for their assemblies, or what the renovator is putting to the exterior, or whatever they're doing to the building envelope. So we have an air barrier. Is it interior or exterior? The vapor diffusion retarder, where does it go? What does it solve? Insulation, what's your best choice for above grade, below grade, the interior, the exterior? Do you need a permeable material? Is impermeable the way to go? So there's a lot of decisions to be made. And if your client is coming to you and has asked for a material, and you don't have that in stock, or it's not something you carry, you're going to have to be able to provide them with a reasonable substitute that is going to match the characteristics of the product that they have spec'd. So material choices, to wrap up, are key to the performance success as well as code compliance. So performance success means that we can keep the house comfortable, but we're also not baking in unintended consequences of trapping moisture or, excuse me, creating other issues in the house that are going to cause some comfort problems. So as technical sales folks, who do you serve? You serve the builders and the renovators, but more importantly, who's coming into the store to talk to you about the materials? Is it the builder or the renovator, or is it their contractors? And out of that whole chain of people who are involved in the process of building, who's the person who understands the code and the building science? And who are they relying on for the materials choices and substitutions? It's going to have to be partially up to you folks who are doing the selling. And that brings us to the WRLA Academy, where we have some key courses for members of the organization to bring you up to speed. So we have these top two here at the left: net zero energy for new construction and whole house energy retrofit, which are high performance courses. No, sorry, courses for high performance for either new construction or retrofit. Excuse me. Second row down, construction technology is more generic. It doesn't actually move towards high performance buildings, but it gives you the fundamental information you need to know for a new construction or renovation. And then at the bottom here, these blue courses were specific for builders for BC housing. We have 3 courses here: building science, building envelope, and air barriers. There's some repetition across those 3, but those might be something that are helpful to folks who are in BC specifically. I want to talk a little bit about why Blue House and why online learning. And that was a very quick segue, sorry about that. So kids are sponges. They soak up information and then they apply that information to their experience. As adults, we don't soak things up so easily. We learn via repetition, by gaps in time so that we can think about things and revisit and, have a little bit of flex in there, but also so that we can put things into context. Everything, as an adult, everything you learn is in context, it's relational. It's, oh, I get it. It's what you're talking about is like this piece that I know from my life. So we do a lot of storytelling in our conversations, right? So these are the basis for our course design, instructional design, and the way that we present it. And it turns out that while convoluted, brains are actually very simple. This is high level. I'm not going to get into brain science too much, but here's the gist of how you learn and how you best learn online. Safety first. New things are dangerous. It's like known things become safe. Safe things give you control. Once you're in control, you can win at something. And once you're winning, that bashes your dopamine button on and on and on. Dopamine is the thing that makes us feel good. And I want to jump to this because what makes online games appealing is brain science. Regardless of the type of online game, they're using instructional design and brain science to get you involved and to keep you involved. Whether it's Candy Crush or Grand Theft Auto and everything in between, exactly the same premise. So online learning uses a lot of gamification, and this is where we have taken our 10, almost 11 years of being online to the next level. And here's how it works. When you're in the beginner level, when you start in on a game, what they present to you is simple skills mastery. Here's how to navigate through the game. And here's the journey that this game is going to take you on. So let's get you ramped up with some first points. And then the next thing is you level up. And when you level up, you master more skills. A good game is going to put Easter eggs in there. So you find surprises. You get invested in the story or the journey. You get on the leaderboard. Oops, and you level up. So those are all in our platforms in terms of how we're helping you to move through a course. But the other thing that makes games appealing is this: community and engagement. And this is the toughest part for us as online learners or online educators to get in place. And now we have a new platform that we're using that actually has a community forum. So we can now get people to in contact with each other. So it's not a solo endeavor. So I'm going to leave you with this. This is a very quick rundown of some of the features of our seriously enjoyable learning. You'll be able to see this in the, the PDF that we're going to send out. I really want to just jump ahead, so I want to give us as much time for questions as possible. You have access to a free 3-day trial of the Whole House Energy Retrofit course that we've just launched. And when you go there, I think this will work. It's going to get you to this place, and you put your name in, your email address, and then agree to the terms, and that pops you into the trial, which is you get access to a few of the lessons, but you can see what the platform is like. And then the other place where you go to buy things is through the Academy page here. And you get 10% off the prices, and everything that's available to you is in here. So the whole collection I just showed you earlier, the ones that I felt would be key for everyone to be able to access. And that's it. What are your questions?
Thank you, Shauna. I'm monitoring the chat. I did put a post in the Q&A, but we also have the chat. So if anybody does have any questions for Shauna, if you want to put those in the chat, then we can make sure that she can address them. I noticed a couple of comments, and I don't know if there was a poll or something that went out, but just there's a question mark and then something about saying yes. So I'm not sure if there's a question in there at all, but if there is, please do let us know. We have sent out the link for the website so folks can register. One of the reasons why we really wanted to make sure that we had this webinar and even partnered with Blue House Energy is chatting with various members. There was some conversation about how our industry is a little bit behind on some of this knowledge base. So that's the reason why we wanted to make sure that we had this opportunity to present on the building code side of things, but also talk about the energy efficiency. So we'll just give a couple seconds here to see if anyone has any questions. But Shauna, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Well, I think the big thing is that you're not going to have any choice. Energy efficiency is not going to be an option anymore. It's not in whether you're building new construction or when you get into the retrofits, especially with the 2025 code coming into play. It's going to be a game changer. And sorry, my dog is, oh, she's dreaming. I can't quite hear through these. But yeah, this is up until just the last few years, this has been optional, right? You can build to code, and code has some prescriptive pieces in it, and so you can follow those. Or you could do the energy advisor path and get an ERS rating. But going forward now, nationally, things have changed. So they changed in BC a few years ago, and now BC is at step 3. I'm unclear at this point whether the 2025 cycle will push people into the tier 3 of the national code, but all of the provinces and territories have agreed that they will follow 2020 code, which is in place now, and 2025. And here in Nova Scotia, for example, we're going to have it's going to be adopted within 18 months of it being published. So this is
so it's not something we can avoid. I know that there's some commentary I've had from folks who are looking to retire, and they've said, well, I kind of don't need to worry about this. But the same standpoint as a business, it's really important to stay on top of these because the materials are going to have to be supplied and builders are going to have to follow this code. So like you said, there's no way around it.
Yeah, and then we haven't touched on anything to do with mechanical systems and, or window performance. Anything you're selling, you're going to have to be part and parcel of this part of the industry now. It's no longer I'm providing your structural stuff and finishes and away you go.
Okay. Well, I don't see any questions coming in, and I don't know if it's maybe because there's a technical issue. If there are some questions that might not be coming through the chat, we can always send them to my email or Chris's email, and we can forward them on to Shauna and make sure that she can get back to you on that piece. But on that note, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate everyone that came on the call and for your presentation, and of course for walking us through some of the learning as well. And a huge thank you once again to All Weather Windows for your support and for making sure that we can continue to move forward with our webinars and of course talk about the building code side of things. So.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Take care.
I hope everyone has a really great afternoon.